Hey there, Ruth Haven Grounds family. Today we're diving deep into one of the most fascinating questions I get asked constantly. Which soil amendment actually feeds your microbes the fastest? I've tested all three in my own garden beds, and the results honestly surprised me. So let's cut through the marketing hype and talk about what actually happens when you add biochar, alfalfa, or kelp to your soil. Here's the truth that took me years of gardening to fully appreciate. Alfalfa meal is the undisputed champion when it comes to instantly supercharging soil microbes. Within hours of application, your soil biology kicks into overdrive. But before you rush off to buy a bag, let me explain exactly why this happens and what it means for your garden. Alfalfa meal contains something magical called triacontanol, a natural growth stimulant that microbes absolutely devour. But more importantly, it's packed with readily available proteins, sugars, and starches that beneficial bacteria can break down immediately. When you work alfalfa into your soil, it's like throwing an all-you-can-eat buffet for your microbial workforce. Within the first 24 to 48 hours, bacterial populations can multiply exponentially. I remember the first time I really understood this power. I had two identical tomato beds, and I added alfalfa to one as a side dressing. Within a week, the difference in plant vigor was striking. The leaves were darker, growth was more aggressive, and the plants just looked healthier overall. That's the microbial activity translating directly into plant nutrition. When those bacteria feast on alfalfa, they release nitrogen, enzymes, and growth hormones that plants can uptake immediately. The protein content in alfalfa typically ranges from 15 to 20%, which is significantly higher than most other plant-based amendments. This protein breaks down into amino acids and ultimately into plant-available nitrogen, but it's the speed of this process that sets alfalfa apart. Unlike slow-release amendments, alfalfa starts working within hours because the microbes can access these nutrients without extensive decomposition. Now, don't get me wrong, biochar is absolutely incredible, but it plays a completely different role in your soil ecosystem. Think of biochar as the apartment complex where microbes live, not the food they eat. When I first started using biochar, I made the classic mistake of expecting immediate results. That's not how this amendment works, and understanding this distinction is crucial. Biochar is essentially charcoal made from organic material through a process called pyrolysis. Its porous structure creates millions of tiny homes for microbes, and it can hold on to water and nutrients like a sponge. A single gram of quality biochar can have a surface area of 300 square meters or more. That's roughly the size of a tennis court, compressed into something smaller than a sugar cube. The real magic of biochar happens over months and years, not days. When you first add pure biochar to soil, it can actually temporarily tie up nitrogen as microbes colonize all those empty pores. This is why I always recommend charging your biochar first by mixing it with compost or worm castings for at least a few weeks before application. Once established, biochar becomes a permanent microbial habitat that improves your soil structure for decades, potentially even centuries. In my raised beds, where I incorporated biochar 3 years ago, the soil structure is noticeably better than beds without it. Water retention improved, and I need to fertilize less frequently because nutrients don't leach away as quickly. But did it supercharge microbes instantly? Absolutely not. Biochar is an investment in long-term soil health, not a quick microbial boost. Kelp meal deserves serious respect, but again, it's not the instant microbial activator that alfalfa is. What makes kelp special is its incredible mineral diversity and plant growth hormones, particularly cytokinins and auxins. When I add kelp to my garden, I'm primarily thinking about trace minerals and stress resistance, not feeding microbes. The beauty of kelp is that it contains over 60 trace minerals and elements that might be deficient in your soil. These include boron, zinc, manganese, iron, and iodine. Nutrients that plants need in tiny amounts, but that make a huge difference in overall health and disease resistance. I've noticed that plants treated with kelp seem to handle temperature stress better and show improved frost tolerance in spring. Kelp does feed microbes, but the process is much slower than with alfalfa. The tough cellular structure of seaweed takes time to break down. However, kelp contains alginic acid and other compounds that help improve soil structure and water retention, similar to biochar but through a different mechanism. The hormones in kelp also stimulate root development, which indirectly supports a larger microbial population by increasing root exudates. In my experience, kelp works best as part of a balanced fertility program, rather than as a standalone microbial inoculant. I typically apply it at the beginning of the season and again midsummer, expecting subtle but meaningful improvements in plant resilience rather than explosive microbial growth. Okay, let's get into what's actually happening at the microscopic level when you add alfalfa to soil. Beneficial bacteria like Bacillus and Pseudomonas species, along with Actinomycetes and fungi, immediately recognize the available carbon and nitrogen sources. They start secreting enzymes to break down the alfalfa's cellular structure, multiplying rapidly as they feed. This microbial explosion has cascading effects throughout your soil food web. As bacteria populations boom, protozoa that feed on bacteria also increase. These protozoa then release excess nitrogen in plant-available forms as they digest their bacterial prey. Meanwhile, fungal populations grow more slowly but steadily, creating vast networks that transport nutrients and water to plant roots. The triacontanol in alfalfa acts like a biological accelerant. Research has shown that this compound stimulates plant metabolism at the cellular level, while also being a preferred food source for certain beneficial microbes. It's this dual action, feeding microbes while directly benefiting plants, that makes alfalfa so powerful. In my own garden at Ruthhaven Grounds, I've developed a system that really leverages the strengths of all three amendments. When I'm starting a new bed or transplanting hungry feeders like tomatoes, peppers, or squash, I mix alfalfa meal into the planting hole or work it into the top few inches of soil. I use roughly 1 to 2 cups per 10 square feet, depending on the crop and existing soil fertility. For immediate results, I'll sometimes make alfalfa tea by soaking the meal in water for 24 to 48 hours. This creates a nutrient-rich liquid that delivers both soluble nutrients and beneficial microbes directly to plant roots. The smell isn't pleasant, but honestly, the results speak for themselves. Biochar gets incorporated during soil building, usually in fall or early spring. I charge it first by layering it with compost in a pile for at least a month. Then I work it into beds at a rate of about 10% by volume. This is my long-term soil investment that keeps paying dividends year after year. Kelp meal goes into my general soil blend and gets reapplied as a light top dressing several times during the growing season. I also use liquid kelp as a foliar spray during stressful periods like heat waves or after transplanting. Here's what I've learned after years of experimentation. The best soil health doesn't come from choosing one amendment over the others. It comes from understanding what each does best and using them strategically. Alfalfa gives you that instant microbial boost and quick nitrogen release. Biochar provides permanent infrastructure for microbial communities and nutrient retention. Kelp delivers trace minerals and hormones that improve plant resilience. When I prepare a bed for heavy feeders, I incorporate biochar into the base layer, blend alfalfa meal into the planting zone, and have kelp meal ready for supplemental feeding throughout the season. This approach addresses immediate needs while building long-term soil health. The microbial activity you get from alfalfa is real and measurable. I've taken soil samples from treated and untreated beds, and the bacterial counts in alfalfa-amended soil are consistently higher within the first 2 weeks. But that biochar bed from 3 years ago, it maintains higher overall microbial biomass year-round because those microbes have permanent homes in all those carbon pores. Understanding soil microbes has completely transformed how I garden. These microscopic workers are manufacturing plant-available nutrients, fighting off pathogens, improving soil structure, and even communicating with plant roots. When you supercharge this population with alfalfa, You're not just adding fertility, you're activating an entire biological workforce that does things no chemical fertilizer can replicate. The instant gratification of alfalfa doesn't mean the other amendments are less valuable. Think of it like this. Alfalfa is coffee for your soil, biochar is the house your microbes live in, and kelp is the vitamin supplement that keeps everything balanced. You want all three in your soil management toolkit, used at the right times for the right reasons. Thanks for digging deep into soil science with me today, Ruth Haven Grounds community. If this article helped you understand how to truly feed your soil, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more practical, research-backed gardening wisdom. Share this with a fellow gardener who's ready to unlock the power of soil microbes, and drop a comment about your own experiences with these amendments. Let's keep growing together, one thriving microbe at a time.